Any other words? Cassie's saying I'm good with one-on-one conversations, and you're saying, Michelle's saying I'm not comfortable. I know a lot. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like you're in the
I just know, like, I know a lot about climate change, but I think it's because I live in an area that's very conservative, um, and a little bit more on the right leaning. And
Yep.
so trying to have conversations with people, I find not easy. Even my friends.
Yeah, totally fair. That makes sense. I'm just looking at the chat here. Cassie's saying, I always worry I'll be caught up by a question that I don't know the answer to if I'm being interviewed or if I'm talking to someone who's actively arguing against me. And Bill's saying, I describe my travels to the Arctic as an icebreaker. Oh, that's neat. You use those as icebreakers, literal icebreakers. That's awesome. And oh, interesting. Claire is saying, um, if the action is broader, like an op-ed or an interview, counsels, because it feels personal. You've got Claire, you're saying that some of the other parents work in oil and gas, and it feels, and so what I'm hearing, like words like intimidating, um, uh, this business about there's a thing of like, if I'm talking directly around other people who I know's livelihood is wrapped up in fossil fuels, and I am actively saying this is something we need to transition away, that is a very hard to be in. So what we wanted to kind of start with was actually naming that those are such common, like, of course we all feel like that, right? Because we know, probably all of us know that, well, yelling is not going to really get us any further. So I don't want to yell at people, but I don't want to, I need to have this conversation, and it's going to make other people uncomfortable. And I don't know, especially there's a lot of people who appear to identify as women in this group, and we've all kind of been socialized to like not make people uncomfortable, right? So that can feel, anyway, so kind of just wanted to start with surfacing this feeling of like, that's really, really normal. And those, not only is it normal for those of us in the room, it's normal for so many people. And in fact, the whole thing, when we said I was hoping that you would leave with a sense of like, your voice matters, is because of this thing called the spiral of silence, which affects like so many people. People worry, I don't know enough. As someone else said, if I get caught off guard with a question and I don't know the specific answer to it, then I feel like I'm on my back foot. Um, People feel like it's too political. It feels like it will bring up feelings of like discomfort and stuff with others. And sometimes people feel like no one else seems to care. The spiral of silence is this thing for all the reasons that we mentioned. This feels uncomfortable. I'm not going to do it. And so, where you see the thought bubble there, I don't hear anyone talking about it. So I assume that they don't care. So I'm not going to talk about it either. So because I'm not talking about it, everyone assumes no one else cares about it. So we don't work on solutions. Climate change gets worse, and the spiral continues. Um, I think it's worth noting and remembering that those interested and invested in maintaining the status quo really get a lot out of us feeling uncomfortable and self-silencing. So those of us who are like, okay, this really matters and I need to take this, I think we need to make space for some courage, like make space for like being tender with ourselves, but also like be courageous and know that of course this feels uncomfortable. They want us to be uncomfortable and not do anything about it. And so let's actually, like, when we break the spiral of silence, it can really make a difference. Um, just as one example of this spiral of silence in action, um, a study spanning 125 countries, they asked, would you be willing to give 1% of your income to tackle climate change? And globally, around the world, 69% of people said yes, which is very high, higher than in Canada. That's a whole other interesting thing. In Canada, the number was 43. But let's take 69% said, I would be willing to donate 1%. That's real money, right? Then they asked, would others in your country say yes? And what do you think the response was? Feel free to shout it out. I
I'm
kind of
sure
know.
everyone assumed no one else would.
Exactly. Yeah. That was very like leading the witness, wasn't it? 43% said yes. So 69 said I would be willing to. Only 43% thought other people would. This pattern was repeated in every single country. In Canada, the numbers were 49% and then dropped down to 32%. So there was variance in that, but overall, everyone underestimated the amount of support that others have for climate action. Now, why does this matter? Well, because it has implications for public support, which in turn influences policy decisions. Some studies have shown like where does social public opinion need to be to get to tipping points? And some people have said 10%, some people have said 40%. There was a study a few years ago that said 25%. But the point is, every time we don't use our voice, we are preventing, or we're certainly not helping us get to that tipping point. You don't need everyone to be on board, but you do need enough of us to be on board. And we have the power to help shift that because people trust people around them. So using your voice as a parent advocate is particularly effective because, I mean, there's an inherent sense of altruism in the lens of a parent speaking, right? That builds credibility. So parents are incredibly powerful advocates. You can make a real difference in terms of shaping public opinion and also helping other parents and other people see themselves in the climate movement. So so it matters, but it also works, which is really cool. We love this example from For Our Kids and other groups in Vancouver, where there had been a ban on gas in new buildings, and then some lobbyists came and said, "Oh no, it's going to paralyze our building industry. It's going to make buildings more expensive. And don't you want to build new buildings in this housing crisis?" And so they went to reverse that decision. And through organizing and letter writing and what was it, 140 something people deputing, like the deputations were so long they had to go into the next day. All that people power reversed the decision. And at least one counselor who is one of the ones who changed her vote, said that she was specifically moved by the voices of parents and their kids. You can see some of one of the signs there that some of the counselors displayed on their desks, and in a moment of lobbying hilarity, some of the some of the opposition said, "No, you can't display those signs because they're too intimidating." Which, who's intimidated by these beautiful signs from children? So using our voices is vital. It makes a real difference, but how do we actually do it? Barbara is going to walk us through a bunch of options of, the various ways that we can use our voice. So Barbara, over to you.
Yeah, and I just before we move on, I do want to acknowledge this comment by Claire in the chat because I think it's really important in terms of thinking about like how we're leaving when we're communicating with people, when we're using our voice. Ideally, we're looking to create a connection. And we know that if we're getting to a point of shame, like shame is paralyzing. People don't move when they feel shame. So ideally, one of the things we're doing is finding points of action, and those actions don't have to be we're going to go out and like the environmental movement is often, and I'm sure you guys have heard this, like accused of wanting perfection, like, and that makes it an extremely useful straw man, but like what we're actually after is improvement, right? Um, so I think, helping to keep that frame in your conversation and with your members, Claire, working through those sort of conversations. Katie, I want to let you hop in here too if you want to.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, just to say that's I hadn't seen that comment. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And just like, yeah, the shame piece doesn't actually move people. So yeah, as we're going through this, if you can think the whole time about just like, if ultimately what I'm trying to do is build connection with people and help them see their place in this and see how there's a path for them and that they're welcome in this big tent or whatever, then yeah, that's such a helpful thing to surface. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And it sounds like some of you guys are kind of veterans of some of these tactics I'm going to go through. But we're talking about using your voice, but there's all kinds of ways to do that. Many of which you've done already. So letters to the editor, which remain actually. Oh, sorry, was somebody jumping in? Letters to the editor, which actually they're still people like to hear from other people, right? So this actually remains a really read section of the newspaper. You can see the Calgary Sun headline right there about climate change, where you wouldn't necessarily expect that in another section of the Sun. So that's that's an excellent way to sort of get other points of view to an audience who wouldn't necessarily hear it in a different way as well. And they tend to be short too, so that if you only have a little bit of time, this can be a really good option. Oh.
Oh, right.
An op-ed is another really good one, especially if you've done an event or you have a moment where you haven't gotten necessarily the attention or media coverage, or if you're seeing like sort of the dominant conversation is going in a way, or you have an interesting point of view that you feel is not being heard. An op-ed is a really good, another really good option to get it out here. So the Telegraph Journal in New Brunswick is small paper, doesn't have a lot of space for environmental coverage. Jim Emberger here is a longtime activist, and like a really great voice against fracking in New Brunswick. So him getting out there and talking about this was a really excellent way to get that point of view in front of decision makers. Interviews. So this is an awesome piece of work from the report For Our Kids just did with Cape. This is one of the co-authors, and you can see she did video interviews um, the CBC, and also so she's both talking about her research and the impact of their findings, both video and in print. So this is a twofer, so it's really great that you can get the message out in two different ways. Um, Deputation. So this is an opportunity to directly talk to council or city staff, or MPs, any kind of like directly to your decision makers, but often you will also be heard by other people in the room. So you will be heard by other local businesses and other members of the community. So and this can have, and then you can see here that it also turned up in a Star article. So a lot of these are like, you can double up, and it's not just kind of like one format. And social media, if you don't follow Karishma here, I encourage it. Karishma Climate Girl, she's very fun and interesting, and she does the sort of memes, but also she does the very classic talking in your car about an issue kind of move. And here she's just talking about some newspaper coverage she saw around wildfires in Alberta and how irritated she was about it. And it's so important to have people out there talking on social media about this, because if we're not there, like, we absolutely know that folks who do not want climate action to succeed are all over social media. So we do need the inverse as well. And the playground chats, which I'm hearing that people have a lot of trepidation about this, but this is just any old marketing. Some of you may have had any old marketing courses or something. Any old marketing course will tell you you can't beat word of mouth. And that's when you're talking to your neighbors, you're talking to other parents. Like, that's really what it comes down to. That's what builds the personal connection. That's what helps you understand where their objections are, and what sort of where they're coming from too. So it's two-way communications, which is always going to be stronger and more durable. So kind of when we're talking about using your voice, there's all these sort of formats, and these are just some examples. There's so many more. We really encourage you kind of not to be limited in what you're thinking about and how you're using your voice.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that overview. And I saw Bill put something in the chat about sharing your approach, which I think is there's a lot of really good things there. Bill, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, yeah. But the idea of like finding, like, you're talking about, don't directly challenge beliefs or self-interests, and find a side door. I feel like those are in some ways other ways of saying, like, like, don't do things that will harm like stop a connection from forming, and see where there is a place to form a connection. So if we think of it as like, humaning 101, then that can be, well, I don't think be helpful, but it's something we all aspire to, right? Um, oh, and think again. I don't know that one, Michelle. Is there anything you want to add about it?
Yeah, he's just Adam Grant is I don't know what his background is, but he's written a number of books and he's got a really great ideas on how to talk to people about topics that are I don't know, kind of prickly. And his big thing too is that you have to be curious, like more approaching things with curiosity. And he says to use the phrase, how do you know? So if you're wanting, instead of like, I can't remember the other one. Like I said, my brain is pretty fried right now. Yeah, he's got a lot of examples of people changing their views. It's slow though, because it involves making connection and it involves like talking and listening, a lot of listening and being curious and connecting with somebody as a human.
Yeah. Yeah. That's neat. And Cassie's also putting Saving Us up there, and Catherine Hayhoe is the OG on like important to talk about climate, right? She has that. I almost put a snapshot of her TED talk from, I think it was like 2019 or something. It's just like the most important thing you can do is talk about it. Um, and that's great. Yeah, exactly. Um, we can come back to Michelle, but maybe I'd love to hear, like, when you said, I love that example of like, how do you know, maybe in contrast to like, what do you know, that feels very fixed, but how do you know is a more kind of involves the person. And feel free to jump in now, or maybe later on you could share, like, have you put any of those into practice, and what has that been like?
No, I haven't. I haven't because A, it's frightening. And B, I don't have time, which sounds horrendous as it comes out of my mouth. But I lack, and I don't think I'm alone in this, but I might be, but I lack those avenues to connect with other people, because I'm just really busy with work and with my kids. There was a really great podcast episode on Trevor Noah's podcast where he was talking about to somebody who, I can't remember his name. He's a researcher in the States and he wrote a book a long time ago called Bowling Alone. And his whole thing is about how you have to we seek community, and the bowling team, the bowling league was such a great venue for people because you would go to your bowling league and you were interacting with all different people who had all different beliefs, and you had bowling to connect you, and every once in a while there would be topics that came up that would be discussed, politics, whatever. But we're more and more, we're isolated. We stay home, we connect on social media, we don't have time to go out and do things, or we're interacting with people who are doing the same thing. So me interacting with other parents who are just as privileged as I am, who all are in the same excuse me, in the same circles as I am.
Yeah. Kate, yeah, jump in.
Okay.
Also, hi.
Oops.
So nice to see
Hi,
you.
sorry. I'm sorry I'm late. I don't know if you can hear me. Is this going to be taped?
I believe this is being taped.
Yay, because I was like so sad. Oh, anyhow, sorry. Yay, I made it. I just want to say what Michelle's saying, because I've been thinking about it. And I think this crazy thing has happened because of everybody using cars and we all drive really far. It keeps us apart from each other. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because I'm like, why don't I want to get together with people? And I'm like, because it's going to be like 45 minutes, even in the city. Do you know what I mean? Like, it takes me half an hour to get to my church and it's close. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyhow.
Yeah, totally. No, cars is a huge, so there's such an interesting thing here around, like, it's the social isolation, and then that helps, reinforces these echo chambers, and there's fewer and fewer opportunities, which to me really says that then if any little thing we can do, whether it's in line at the grocery store, or staying connected with someone whose views are a little bit different than ours, and just like not losing that connection, that's actually like part of democracy building, which I know is not really what we're talking about today, but it kind of is, right? Because it's like we're trying to find those ways. So I think, and I'm like not an expert on this, but just like from what I'm hearing from you guys, like these little moments of like acupuncture or like little like, where can we weave in there's like the big official things that we're doing for advocacy, but also realize, given the social isolation and polarization that's happening, where can we weave in these little moments of connection, especially across views? Barbara, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I want to first share a little anecdote actually on this point about social connection. I was in a Tim Hortons and there was a group of older gentlemen all sort of taking up the back corner at the Tims, and they were debating very loudly in French, so I wasn't following 100% of it, but about whether EVs are like ready for prime time, like whether EVs are mainstream yet. And I'm like, this is excellent that we are on the way. Like this is what we need, you know? Like um and the other thing I wanted to weigh in on just a bit on this point about connection and understanding, and I know some of you are in more conservative environments where there this is maybe easier said than done. Um, but sometimes this gets interpreted as like, don't make your argument, or kind of like, don't like kind of back off what you're trying to say a bit, like water down what you're trying to say a bit. And that's not ideally that's not what's interpreted what we want the takeaway to be. We want the takeaway to be like, think about how they might understand or connect with how you're trying to say. Like, think about what would persuade them to agree with you. What about what you believe would be interesting and useful to them, where what you believe and what they believe or what's important to them might connect. So I just want to flag that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, great connection. Claire, we'll do one more and then we'll keep going, because we want to make sure that there's time for our exercises.
So
Yeah.
I have a challenging situation that's coming up tomorrow night that I need some help with.
Great.
And the situation is, I sit on my son, my oldest, I sit on two school councils, but my oldest son, he's in grade 11. And so tomorrow night we are going to be talking. I have emailed the school council and we have a policy that's going forward on electric school buses. And I know that the chair of this school council is the COO of Centrix Petroleum. And I know that because last year, when I presented a policy on further integrating climate and biodiversity education into the K-12 system, I got a very frosty reception from this school council. And so I took that away and I Googled the people on the school council, and that's how I found out that he was the COO of Centrix Petroleum. So now I'm bringing forward this policy again, and I'd like the school council to support it. They did support my policy last year. I wrote another one on clean air in schools. So I'm going to try to tie the two together: clean air in schools, clean air outside of schools. And I guess what I would like to know is how, knowing this about this person, and we didn't have a very positive interaction. He online, like we had an email thing, and he was very rude to me. This was afterwards. And he copied everyone in on the school council email and the principal and everything. Like, it was really awful, to the point where the principal called me and said, I'm not sure why that happened. And like, so I just don't know. I was just going to speak from the heart about why this was important to me, why I believe addressing air pollution is important to me. But if you've got any tips for that kind of a situation, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can see it in the chat here. I think there's a lot of people who are really feeling both for you of trying to navigate that, and also, you know, really impressed that you're and just appreciative of you continuing that in spite of that frosty reception. So first of all, just like good on you. That's great. And also really like hearing like you trying to navigate like, okay, well, how can I do this? We are going to actually we'll shift to it in just a moment about like developing our climate story. So maybe this is a chance for you to practice sort of like what is a way that you could speak to the heart about it. The theme that comes up for me, I think, is like naming the ambivalence, and as a way to give, like, I think there's certain places we're coming straight out and being like, we were very lucky to have fossil fuels to make our lives more comfortable. Catherine Hayhoe does this like really well, just like like we have a lot to be grateful for, and we didn't know that there was this cost, but we must acknowledge that, like, both from just like our material well-being and like the benefits to the economy and our communities and so on, whatever. And now we see that it's time to shift, and the shift is happening, and we want to do it in a way that supports workers and stuff. It's like kind of just like naming that we're all wrapped up in that in the world, I think, can at least soften it. But you may have that sounds like a particularly frosty kind of interaction. But yeah, playing with that ambivalence, I think, is a really, really important thing. Kate, do you want to respond to specifically about that? Because I'm thinking maybe we could keep going a little bit, and because this stuff will all come back to you, but jump in if you've got something you want to.
Mine's super fast.
Yeah.
Just be like, because I think this is something Catherine Hayhoe said too, was like, we're so grateful where fossil fuels got us to, they got us to this great spot, and now we see how we can go.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. Yeah. So I think there may be something to that, but your instinct around like speaking from the heart, I think, is really valuable. So we're going to spend most of the rest of the time talking about our climate stories. And so, Claire, like, this isn't a like, we're pushing this aside. This is like, we'll come back to this. I mean, climate stories, why stories? Apparently humans are 22 times more likely to remember a story than any other kind of communication. I love this. In a fight between a story and a fact, the story will win. Yeah. Stories can evoke emotion. We can build connection through shared experiences. They can help people process their experiences and ambivalencies. This kind of sense of like, I increasingly think that the more we can model, yes, it's there, we can be in a situation where we can feel grateful and also feel like it's time for change. That can be really powerful for modeling that for other people. And stories can really help people connect the dots between climate changes. It's like future polar bears, like things that feel so disconnected to us, to this like sense of, hey, this is happening right now, climate impacts, and climate solutions are underway. Here is the entry point to be part of it. Many of you had seen that Later is Too Late report from Potential Energy Coalition a couple years ago. And that was 60,000 people. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I get it right. 60,000 people from around the world. And they found that climate concern, which we know is high and underestimated, doesn't necessarily translate into support for specific policy action. So there's this gap. I'm concerned, but then if you ask me to support the specific policy, there's a gap. But that effective messaging can significantly increase support. And you may remember what their big finding was. What was the message for those of you who remember that one? Do you remember what the big finding was in terms of the message that like really resonated the most with people, or like the big sort of narrative frame? Again, I feel like I'm kind of leading the witness here. I'm going to shout it out. Protect what we love, Claire says. Yes, exactly. That it wasn't about jobs. It wasn't even like, extreme weather and stuff mattered, whatever. But the biggest thing of all was protect what we love. So which is why personal stories grounded in our like lived experiences as we wrestle with our pain of losing the things that were important to us in our childhood and so on, they can be super, super powerful. So I love this model of the climate stake story that's developed by Neighbors United. Some of you know they do really neat deep canvassing work in many parts of the country now. And they invited us, said, sure, go ahead and share this with others. So a lot of this is adapted from their things. But in terms of some of the tips that they had, number one, have it be grounded in live experience. So tell a story about a specific time and place when you or a loved one was impacted, and like, by something like climate change. And related to that, have use feeling words. So it's not just this thing happened, and I felt. So it's like naming explicitly embarrassed, scared, sad, all of the things that will help connect the listener to, oh yes, okay, that is an experience that I can relate to. You can even tell a story about someone else, but how did it make you feel hearing that story, or what did you learn from it? And again, related to this is like using detail to paint a picture. So it's like who, what, where, when, why, how, all the things. Make it as vivid as possible so that people can really feel that. Now, there are also sort of a couple of caveats there, or not caveats, but like additional things to remember. Modeling relatable vulnerability. So Neighbors United talks about sharing from scars, not wounds. And on the one hand, this can mean if you make sure it's a story that you're ready to share, because if it's too raw, then you don't have to put yourself through that if it's something that you're not feeling ready to share yet anyway. But also that a lot of sometimes Barbara and I talking about this earlier today, if it's too raw, it can actually take away the credibility a little bit. And, I think that's kind of the fault of our over society that's not so good at holding space for big feelings. But it can backfire if the emotions are again, if it's making people feel too uncomfortable, you want to get their attention, but if it's feeling too uncomfortable, it can sometimes undermine credibility. So you want to be careful about that. And I don't know, thinking about like the story Olympics, some people, and I'm going to share a story from Montana, and she has a very, who's the ED of Neighbors United, she has a really powerful story. But, and I went, even when I hear that, I'm like, oh, that's if I don't have that situation, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be the most thing. Finding something that's like specific and vulnerable, that's a common experience, can be really powerful. For me, the one I really like noticed a lot was I live in Toronto in Treaty 13 territory, and when the wildfires, was it 2 summers ago? The wildfires were terrible, and that was the first time that like I had really experienced that. And it was hearing so many parents be like, what, my kid can't go outside, like they have to stay inside from daycare, like that's horrible. And I mean, so that I didn't have to flee, thankfully, from a wildfire, excuse me, but that experience of like being like, I'm worried about my kids, the air that my kid is breathing, that's like a very common and relatable one. So we're going to practice developing our stories, but let's listen first to Montana's.
So when I moved to this area about 12 years ago, it looked like this. And then over time, it's looked more and more like this and like this. For a month and a half, it can be like this. And last summer on my little air quality app, it has like the hazmat face that the person has, the person's wearing for weeks. And it's very scary, not for the, just feeling like this, but I have a child who is now 6. And when she was 2 years old, she was at home with cold, trying to fall asleep one night, and her breathing was very erratic and weird. And, new parent, what do? You call 911 a lot because you don't know what to do. And so I did that, and they came and they were like, her oxygen can't be this low. This is off the charts low. So they got her on oxygen. We went to the emergency room, and it turns out she was having an asthma attack. She's asthmatic. We didn't know. So we got her on the medication, the puffers, and she got stabilized. She's okay. But now every year in the smoky season, which can last for over a month, I'm terrified. As a parent, I want to protect her. That's like my number one job. Keep her safe, make sure she has clean air to breathe, clean water to drink, and healthy food to eat and shelter overhead. And I can't keep her safe from the air. So in these days like this, I keep her inside. I have the air purifiers on. It's very, very scary. And last year, I had the privilege to be able to evacuate us to the Lower Mainland, where I am now, actually, to this house, to my friend's house, to stay here when the hazmat icon was going. And I don't know how we fix this, but I know we got to keep going. And I know that we got to do it together. And sometimes it feels too late, but we got to keep going because it's only going to get worse if we don't do it better. And I got to do it for my kid. I got to know I did everything I can. So that's why I'm in this work. And this is a picture of her in the hospital on oxygen. No one wants to see this. We want her healthy and out playing. And I want her to have the childhood I had, where it wasn't too smoky, too many days to go out and play. So why am I sharing this? This is what's at stake for me. And I know you probably all have stories like that of things that are at stake for you and loved ones that maybe need to breathe, that can't breathe when there is wildfire impacts or whatever the climate impact is that it's affecting you.
Did you, I'm going to just go back for a second and those, did you hear any of those elements in her story? Yeah. Does anyone want to share some things that they heard? Yeah, Claire, go ahead. All of them. Yeah. Is that, Claire, is that what you're going to say?
Yeah, all of them. But yeah, I was going to say she started with her story, and her concern for her daughter, and then that led into why does that matter? So yeah, I thought her transition was really great, and starting with the story was, yeah, I like that model. I think I'm going to try that tomorrow night.
Oh, I'm excited to hear how it what shapes up. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and of course, a good point. Of course, all of them, because this is her list, and of course she's going to match the story too. So that seems like a silly question. But yeah, I think like the connection point to I want there's a couple of other elements that we didn't specifically name, but there was an element of nostalgia. I want the story, I want the childhood, I want her to experience the childhood that I had. So calling out the gap between I had this thing and what is the future for them. That was an interesting part. And then there was a little bit of ambivalence in there too, where she said, did anyone catch that? She said, I don't know how we get there, but I know we have to do something or something like that. So say sort of not this pat, I've got it all figured out. It's really clean, like just kind of being comfortable and like owning the messiness of it. To Barbara's point, it's so easy to get in this like perfection trap of like, oh, well, if you're not doing it perfectly, then it doesn't count. You might as well go home and do nothing, which is, again, really serves the interests of people who want to maintain the status quo. But yeah, there's like thinking about like the messiness, I don't quite know what I'm doing here, is very relatable because, who really knows what they're doing. Cassie's saying, I liked that she started macro and where she lives. So it's relatable, even if you don't have a kid or a kid with asthma. Yeah. And a very genuine and relatable tone and emotional, but not overwhelming. Yeah, I think that's that kind of like share from scars, not open wounds kind of thing. Yeah. So, okay. We want to give you a chance to do this. I'm going to skip over that and start thinking about your climate stake story. So we're going to do about 7 minutes. And we're going to invite you to grab a piece of paper. You can do it on the computer if you want, whatever works. And you might consider questions like what are the ways that you experience climate change and how is it impacting the people and places you love? There might be a little bit of that nostalgia in there. You might certainly, definitely include feeling words. That's a big one. So talk about how these impacts make you feel. You might even start to get into like, what are the things that like your wishes? What are the things that you want to see? And you might want to, like, there might be some of these ambivalencies that come up around like, I don't, I'm not quite sure how we're going to get there, or like, here's the places that are still an unknown path, but I know that we need to move in that direction or something. Are there barriers that you face and what are you doing to overcome them? You don't have to answer any of these specific questions. These are here as guideposts. We'll leave this up on the screen, but they can sort of serve you. Now, some of you might have done an exercise like this before, in which case your options are you can rework that and like add to it and refine it. You can also think of another story, because having in our back pockets a few of these stories can be really useful for different points. So consider that. And after about this 7 minutes or so, we're going to go into pairs in breakout rooms and share them with each other in a very like low stress kind of way, but just to get a chance of like actually practicing them. So they don't need to be long, couple minutes, like maybe not even, like could be 1 minute, no big deal. But yeah, Barbara, any other tips that I should have mentioned?
I think here you just want to don't worry super. I know you're looking for those emotional words, but it's better to sort of get it out than to perfectly wordsmith it this time. Sort of start finding your kind of your story versus like trying to make it all perfect right now. So
Right. That's such a good point, because unlike if you're writing it, it actually, if it's too perfectly written out, it will sound insincere. You know, it's better to make it sound like, not make it sound. It's better for it to be coming from the moment. So you sort of, if you have some bullet points or whatever, but if in the moment you're actually telling it as if you're telling, sorry, I think someone said that was like, it was emotional but not overwhelming, but also like relatable tone. I think Montana's very well practiced at this. And Claire saying you saw her speak at the thing. Yeah. Alberta Talks. Yeah, that's so cool. Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna send you off. I'll put some music on. If it is annoying, just turn it off, and then I'll like wave my hands a lot if or something when the 7 minutes or so is up. And yeah, feel free to have videos on, or if you want to like keep them off, that's also all good too. So we'll see you in about 7 minutes. See if you can hear. Can you hear some music? It's very quiet now. I should have started a song. Okay.
It's gonna take a bit of work. Oh, work. Now that you're here. Whoa, work. 'Cause people come and go, but I think you should know that I think this will work.
A pulse check. Thank you so much for recording, and also to note that when we go into our breakouts, that won't be recorded, so you can feel free to share. So thank you for doing that, Gabriel. How was that for time? Did you feel like, of course, like probably never feel like, well, I would always be like, no, I need more time. But overall, does that feel like it was sort of enough to at least get started? The right amount. Okay, awesome. Jamie, that was very definitive. Nice. Cool. Okay, well, what we're gonna do now then is jump to, oops, sorry, wrong place. There you go. We're gonna jump to sharing your stories. So we're gonna open up some breakout groups. Oh my gosh, Cassie, that's so cool. We're gonna open up our breakout groups, and you should be in groups of 2. If for some reason there's a group of 3, or there's a solo person, we'll just move people and maybe one of us will go into their room, or something. We'll figure that out. And yeah, while you're doing this, the idea is up to 5 minutes, partner A shares their story. Sorry for the typo. Then for about 2 minutes, partner B will offer coaching. The coaching is not about like offering opinions or whatever. It's really a chance to ask questions to help the speaker reflect. So the speaker is going to share their story, and then as the coach, your job is to help them find more of what they're already, see where there's like places that they could go maybe further, or just ask questions, or just, something someone talked earlier about being curious. So things that make you curious. And then we'll try to pipe a little message in saying when it's time to switch, or just switch whenever you do. If for some reason you're both done well before the 15 minutes, then that's great. You can just talk about what it was like to share, and let the conversation go where it will. Sound good? Any questions? Okay. Are you good with the breakout groups? Yeah.
Yes, I'm just gonna put you all into breakout groups, so you'll be with one other person. If you're left alone, let us know, but you should get an invite to join right now.